Sarah Martinez thought she knew her place in the wealthy Martinez family dynasty, the overlooked middle daughter, while her charismatic older brother Michael inherited everything. When their grandfather's will granted Michael a $50 million fortune and the family's luxury resort empire, Sarah accepted what seemed like another familiar disappointment. But when a mysterious envelope arrives at her modest apartment 3 months later, containing documents that expose a decades-old family secret, Sarah discovers that everything she believed about her inheritance, her identity, and her family's legacy has been a carefully constructed lie. Now she must decide whether to claim what's rightfully hers or protect the family that never protected her. The mahogany-paneled walls of Grandfather Eduardo's study felt like they were closing in on me as I sat in the uncomfortable leather chair, watching my brother Michael fidget with his gold Rolex. My name is Sarah Martinez, and at 26, I had already grown accustomed to being the invisible daughter in one of California's most prominent hotel dynasties. The morning fog rolled past the floor-to-ceiling windows of our family's Napa Valley estate, casting everything in an ethereal gray that seemed to match my mood perfectly. Attorney Harrison Webb cleared his throat, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he prepared to read Grandfather Eduardo's final testament. "Before we begin," Mr. Webb announced in his measured professional tone, "I want to remind everyone that Eduardo Martinez was very specific about his final wishes. There are to be no interruptions until the reading is complete." I glanced around the room at my family members, each positioned like chess pieces in this final game. My father, Roberto Martinez, sat rigidly in his usual commanding posture, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. Mother, Patricia, clutched her pearl necklace, a nervous habit she'd developed over 30 years of marriage to a man who valued business over emotion. Michael, my 30-year-old brother, leaned back in his chair with that confident smirk that had charmed investors and broken hearts across 3 states. Everything about him screamed success, from his perfectly tailored Armani suit to the way he owned every room he entered. He had always been Grandfather's favorite, the chosen heir apparent to our family's luxury resort empire. Then there was me, Sarah, the middle child who had somehow become invisible despite my MBA from Stanford and my genuine passion for hospitality management. I wore a simple black dress from Target, not because I couldn't afford better, but because I had learned long ago that drawing attention in this family only led to disappointment. "The last will and testament of Eduardo Martinez," Mr. Webb began, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. "To my beloved family, if you are hearing these words, then I have finally joined your grandmother Maria in whatever comes next." I felt tears prick my eyes at the mention of Grandma Maria, who had passed 5 years earlier. She had been the only family member who truly saw me, who encouraged my dreams of transforming our hotels into more than just luxury destinations. To my son Roberto and daughter-in-law Patricia, I leave the family home in Napa Valley, along with all furnishings and artwork, valued at approximately $8 million. You have been faithful stewards of our family reputation. Dad's face remained impassive, though I caught the slight nod of satisfaction. The house had been in our family for 4 generations, and everyone had expected it would go to him. To my granddaughter, Sarah Elena Martinez, Mr. Webb continued, and I straightened in surprise at hearing my full name. I leave the sum of $2 million to be used for whatever brings you happiness. You have always possessed your grandmother's gentle spirit and your great-grandfather's innovative mind. $2 million. I stared at my hands, overwhelmed. It was more money than I had ever dreamed of having, enough to finally start my own boutique hotel concept that I had been planning for years. Around me, I heard the soft sounds of approval from my parents, and even Michael gave me an encouraging smile. And to my grandson, Michael Roberto Martinez, Mr. Webb's voice took on a deeper timbre, I leave the entirety of Martinez Hospitality Group, including all hotels, resorts, and subsidiary businesses, along with liquid assets totaling approximately $50 million. The room fell completely silent, except for the soft ticking of the antique clock on Grandfather's desk. Michael's smirk had transformed into a genuine smile of triumph, while my parents exchanged meaningful glances. This was what everyone had expected, what had been planned for decades. "There is one final provision," Mr. Webb continued, pulling out a sealed envelope from his briefcase. "This envelope is to be delivered to Sarah Martinez exactly 3 months from today." Eduardo was very specific about the timing and stressed that only Sarah may open it. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the cream-colored envelope with my name, written in Grandfather's distinctive handwriting. "What's in it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Webb shook his head. I don't know. Eduardo sealed it personally and left strict instructions. It's to remain in my office safe until the specified date, then delivered directly to your residence. Michael leaned forward, his curiosity clearly piqued. Come on, Webb. What could be so important that it requires a 3-month delay? I'm afraid that information died with your grandfather, Mr. Webb replied diplomatically. However, he did mention that patience was a virtue Sarah had always possessed, and that some truths require time to be properly understood. The meeting concluded with handshakes and legal paperwork that felt surreal. As we prepared to leave, Michael put his arm around my shoulders with genuine brotherly affection. $2 million, Sarah, that's incredible. You could finally open that boutique hotel you're always talking about. I managed to smile, though something about the mysterious envelope gnawed at me. Yeah, maybe I will. 3 months later, I was sitting in my modest one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco's Mission District, a world away from the family estate's luxury. The envelope had arrived that morning via certified mail, just as Mr. Webb had promised. I had been staring at it for 2 hours, unable to bring myself to break the seal. My apartment was small but cozy, with exposed brick walls and a view of the bustling street below. The sounds of the city filtered through my windows. Honking cars, laughing children, the distant rumble of the BART train. It was a stark contrast to the quiet opulence I had grown up with, but it felt honest in a way that mansion never had. I had used some of my inheritance to quit my corporate job at a rival hotel chain and was now working as a consultant for small, independent hotels. The work was fulfilling, allowing me to help family-owned businesses compete with the major chains. It felt like something Grandma Maria would have approved of. With trembling fingers, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper in grandfather's handwriting, along with a small key and another sealed envelope marked, "For Sarah's eyes only, to be opened after reading this letter." The letter began simply, "My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, then 3 months have passed since my funeral, and you have hopefully begun to understand your own worth beyond what this family has shown you." I took a deep breath and continued reading, my grandfather's words seeming to speak directly to my soul about potential unrealized and dreams deferred. But it was the final paragraph that made my heart stop. The key enclosed opened Safety Deposit Box 247 at First National Bank of San Francisco. Inside, you will find documents that reveal the truth about Martinez Hospitality Group's ownership structure. Your great-grandfather's original will, which I have kept hidden for 40 years, tells a very different story about who should inherit the family business. I pray you will have the strength to claim what was always meant to be yours. What do you think about family secrets that can change everything? Have you ever discovered something that completely altered your understanding of your family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're enjoying this story of hidden inheritance and family revelations, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter where Sarah discovers the shocking truth about her family's empire. But what I found in that safety deposit box the next morning would shatter everything I thought I knew about the Martinez family legacy. The San Francisco fog was unusually thick that Tuesday morning as I walked up the granite steps of First National Bank, clutching the small brass key in my sweaty palm. I had barely slept after reading Grandfather Eduardo's letter, my mind racing with possibilities and fears about what secrets awaited me in Safety Deposit Box 247. The bank's interior felt imposing with its marble floors and vaulted ceilings that echoed every footstep. I approached the customer service desk where a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair greeted me professionally. "I need to access Safety Deposit Box 247, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have the key and identification." She examined my documents carefully before leading me through a secure door and down a corridor lined with identical metal boxes. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows, making everything feel cold and clinical. Box 247 was in the middle section, unremarkable among hundreds of others. "Take all the time you need," the banker said, unlocking the box with her master key while I inserted mine. "I'll be at the desk when you're finished." Alone in the small viewing room, I lifted the metal lid with trembling hands. Inside were several manila folders, a leather-bound journal, and what appeared to be an original legal document with yellowed pages and faded ink. I picked up the oldest document first. Last Will and Testament of Alejandro Martinez, dated December 15, 1943. My great-grandfather's will, supposedly lost in a fire decades ago according to family lore. But here it was, pristine and legally binding, with notary seals that looked authentic despite their age. As I read the archaic legal language, my breath caught in my throat. To my beloved son, Eduardo Martinez, I leave our family home and 10% of Martinez Hospitality Group, with the understanding that he will serve as caretaker for the business until my granddaughter reaches the age of 25. Granddaughter. But grandfather Eduardo only had sons, my father Roberto and his younger brother Carlos, who had died in a car accident in the 1970s. I flipped through the pages frantically until I found the crucial passage that made my world tilt on its axis. To my granddaughter, Sarah Elena Martinez, daughter of my son Carlos Martinez and Elena Rodriguez, I leave controlling interest 60% of Martinez Hospitality Group, along with all associated assets and business holdings. This inheritance shall transfer to her upon her 25th birthday, or upon her grandfather Eduardo's death, whichever comes first. The document slipped from my numb fingers. Carlos Martinez was my uncle, not my father. Roberto was listed as receiving only 30% of the company. And I was not Roberto's daughter at all. With shaking hands, I opened the leather journal and found page after page in my great-grandfather's meticulous handwriting, documenting the real story of my birth and the conspiracy that followed. January 12, 1998, Carlos came to me today with news that will change everything. Elena is pregnant with his child, but her family has disowned her for the relationship. Carlos begs me to let them marry, but Elena is already dying from complications. The doctors say she might not survive the birth. I kept reading, tears blurring my vision as the truth unfolded. My mother Elena had died giving birth to me, and Carlos had been killed in what the family claimed was an accident just 3 months later. But my great-grandfather suspected otherwise. March 18, 1998, Carlos is dead. Roberto claims it was an accident, but the tire marks tell a different story. I believe my eldest son killed his brother to prevent him from claiming his inheritance. But Sarah is alive, and she is the rightful heir to everything I have built. The next entry was dated a week later. Roberto has convinced Patricia to adopt Sarah as their own child. They claim it's out of love, but I know better. By raising her as Roberto's daughter instead of Carlos's, they hope to eliminate her claim to the business. But I have changed my will, and I have hidden the truth where only Sarah will find it when the time is right. I fumbled for the final document in the box, an adoption decree that had been falsified, showing my birth parents as Roberto and Patricia Martinez instead of Carlos Martinez and Elena Rodriguez. But attached to it was DNA testing from a private laboratory, commissioned by my great-grandfather and conducted without anyone's knowledge. The results were conclusive. Roberto Martinez was my uncle, not my father. Patricia was no blood relation at all. And Michael, the golden boy who had inherited everything, was my cousin, not my brother. My phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. "Hey sis, having lunch with Dad to discuss expansion plans for the hotels. Wish you could be here to celebrate with us." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just celebrating their success. They were celebrating what they had stolen from me for 26 years. I photographed every document with my phone, then carefully returned everything to the box. But as I stood to leave, I noticed one final item I had missed, a small audio recorder with a note attached. "Press play when you're ready to hear the whole truth." I hesitated, then pressed the button. My great-grandfather's voice filled the small room, weaker and more frail than I remembered from my childhood, but unmistakably his. "Sarah, my dear granddaughter, if you are hearing this recording, then you now know the truth about your parentage. But there is more you must understand. Roberto did not kill Carlos in a fit of rage. It was planned. Calculated murder designed to secure his position as my heir." My legs gave out and I sank into the chair. My grandfather's voice continuing to describe evidence he had gathered over the years, brake lines that had been cut, witness accounts that had been suppressed, and police reports that had been altered with bribes. I have copies of everything hidden in a second location, but I could never act on this information while I lived. Roberto would have had me declared incompetent, and you would never have learned the truth. But now, my darling girl, you have the power to reclaim what was stolen from both you and your father. The recording ended with instructions for contacting a private investigator who had been paid to continue monitoring the family and gathering evidence. His name is Detective James Morrison, retired SFPD. He knows everything and is waiting for your call. I sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what I had discovered. Not only was I the rightful owner of a $50 million hospitality empire, but my supposed father was actually my father's murderer, and the family I had grown up with had spent 26 years living a lie. My phone rang, startling me back to reality. It was Patricia, the woman I had called Mom for my entire life. "Sarah, darling, we're having a family dinner tonight to celebrate Michael's new acquisition in Monterey. Please come home. We feel like we haven't seen you since the funeral." Her voice, once comforting, now sounded calculating to my ears. How many times had she looked at me over the years, knowing I wasn't her daughter, knowing she was helping to deny me my birthright? "I can't make it tonight," I managed to say. "I have plans." "Oh, that's too bad." "Well, maybe next weekend then. Michael's been asking about you. He says you haven't returned his calls about potentially consulting on the new property." Michael, my supposed brother, who was actually my cousin, offering me scraps from the empire that rightfully belonged to me. After hanging up, I called Detective Morrison's number. He answered on the first ring as if he had been expecting my call for 26 years. "Ms. Martinez," he said, his voice gruff but kind, "I've been waiting for you to find those documents. Are you ready to learn everything? Have you ever discovered that your entire life was built on a lie? How do you process learning that the people you trusted most have betrayed you in the most fundamental way? Let me know in the comments what you think you would do in my situation. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how this story of deception and inheritance unfolds. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the explosive conclusion. Because what Detective Morrison revealed to me in our meeting the next day would give me the power to destroy the people who destroyed my father and stole my inheritance, but it would also force me to choose between justice and the only family I had ever known. Detective James Morrison's office was a cluttered reflection of 30 years in law enforcement, filing cabinets overflowing with case folders, certificates and commendations covering every wall, and the lingering scent of strong coffee that seemed permanently embedded in the furniture. He was a large man in his 60s with silver hair and intelligent blue eyes that had seen too much darkness in the world. "Your great-grandfather was a remarkable man," Morrison began, pulling out a thick folder labeled Martinez Investigation, Carlos Martinez Homicide. "He hired me 2 months after Carlos died, convinced it wasn't an accident. What we found would have sent Roberto to prison for life." I sat across from his desk, still reeling from yesterday's discoveries, as he spread out photographs, police reports, and witness statements that painted a terrifying picture of premeditated murder. The official report claimed Carlos lost control of his vehicle on a rainy night, but look at these tire marks. Morrison pointed to crime scene photos. The skid pattern shows he was forced off the road by another vehicle. And here, see these brake lines? They were cut partially through, designed to fail gradually so the tampering wouldn't be obvious. He handed me another photograph showing Roberto's car from the same time period, with fresh scratches along the passenger side and traces of Carlos's vehicle's paint. Roberto reported this damage the next morning, claiming he hit a deer. But the paint samples tell a different story. "Why didn't you arrest him?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Morrison's expression darkened. "Because Roberto had connections throughout the police department and the district attorney's office. Evidence mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories after receiving unexpected financial windfalls, and the case was quickly ruled an accident and closed." He showed me financial records documenting bribes, intimidation tactics, and cover-ups that extended throughout the local justice system. "Your great-grandfather wanted to expose everything immediately, but I convinced him to wait. Roberto was powerful and ruthless. He would have found a way to silence Eduardo, and likely you as well." The next hour felt like a masterclass in family betrayal as Morrison laid out 26 years of evidence. Phone recordings of Roberto discussing how to handle the Sarah problem, financial documents showing how he had systematically stolen from the company while I was growing up, even psychological evaluations he had commissioned to determine if he could have me declared mentally incompetent. "Your supposed father never intended for you to reach 25, Morrison said grimly. "The plan was to have you institutionalized or worse before you could legally claim your inheritance. Eduardo's death complicated things because it accelerated your timeline, but Roberto still thinks he's won." I stared at the mountain of evidence, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of betrayal. What am I supposed to do with all this? Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying my face carefully. "That depends on what kind of person you want to be, Sarah. You have enough evidence to destroy Roberto completely. Criminal charges for murder and fraud, civil suits that would strip him of everything. You'd get your company back and see justice for your father. But I sensed there was more. But it would also destroy Patricia, who despite everything probably loves you in her own way. Michael would lose everything too, and he genuinely doesn't know the truth about Carlos's death. You'd be burning down the only family you've ever known. That evening, I drove to the Martinez estate in Napa Valley, ostensibly for the family dinner Patricia had mentioned. But really, I wanted to observe them with my new knowledge, to see if I could detect the lies beneath their familiar facades. The house looked exactly as it always had, imposing and beautiful, with perfectly manicured gardens and warm light glowing from every window. But now it felt like a mausoleum built on murder and deception. Patricia greeted me at the door with a hug that felt suffocating rather than comforting. "Sarah! I'm so glad you changed your mind about dinner." Roberto sat in his usual chair in the living room, reading the Wall Street Journal and sipping a scotch. When he looked up and smiled at me, all I could see was a killer who had spent 26 years lying to my face. "There's our consultant," he said, with what I once thought was fatherly pride. "Michael tells me you're doing good work with those little boutique hotels." Michael emerged from the kitchen, still wearing his suit from whatever business meeting had dominated his day. He gave me a brotherly kiss on the cheek and handed me a glass of wine. "I have exciting news," he announced as we sat down for dinner. "We just closed on the Monterey property, and I've been thinking, Sarah, why don't you manage the renovation? It could be your first real project with Martinez Hospitality." The offer was generous and would have thrilled me a week ago. Now it felt like another manipulation, a way to keep me close and grateful while they continued to deny me my birthright. "That's an interesting idea," I managed to say. Throughout dinner, I found myself studying their faces, looking for signs of guilt or deception. Patricia seemed genuinely maternal, asking about my apartment and whether I was eating enough. Michael was enthusiastic about business plans and eager to include me in the family empire's future. But Roberto, there were moments when I caught him watching me with calculating eyes, as if he was constantly assessing whether I posed a threat to his carefully constructed lies. After dinner, Patricia pulled me aside while the men retreated to Roberto's study for brandy and cigars. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, leading me to the garden where we couldn't be overheard. "I know things haven't always been easy for you in this family. Roberto can be demanding, and you've always been different from Michael, more independent." I held my breath, wondering if she was about to confess the truth about my parentage. "But I want you to know that I love you like my own daughter. You are my daughter in every way that matters. And if Roberto ever makes you feel otherwise, you come to me. Promise?" The sincerity in her voice broke something inside me. This woman had raised me, comforted me through childhood nightmares, celebrated my achievements when no one else seemed to notice. How could I destroy her with the truth about her husband's crimes? Later that night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I called Detective Morrison. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted. "Going after Roberto means destroying everyone else, too." "Sarah," Morrison said gently, "I've been investigating crimes for 30 years, and I've learned that justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about making sure the truth has consequences. Your father was murdered, and his killer has profited from that murder for decades. Your great-grandfather died keeping this secret, hoping you would be strong enough to handle it. But what about Patricia and Michael? That's not for me to decide. But ask yourself this: do they deserve to benefit from blood money? And do you deserve to live the rest of your life knowing you let your father's killer win?" The next morning, I made my choice. I called Morrison and asked him to arrange a meeting with the district attorney's office. It was time for Roberto Martinez to face justice for what he had done. But first, I had one more stop to make. I drove to Michael's office at Martinez Hospitality Group headquarters, where he greeted me with his usual warm smile. "Sarah, perfect timing. I was just reviewing the Monterey renovation plans." "Michael," I said, closing his office door behind me, "we need to talk about our grandfather, Carlos." The confusion on his face was genuine, confirming that he truly didn't know the truth about his father's crimes. In the next hour, I told him everything, about the real will, about my true parentage, about the evidence of murder and fraud that would soon become public. Michael's face went through every emotion possible as the truth sank in. Shock, disbelief, horror, and finally a deep sadness that matched my own. "My God, Sarah," he whispered. "All these years, you were my cousin, not my sister. And my father, he killed your father. I wanted you to hear it from me first, I said, before the arrests happen, before it all becomes public. He sat in stunned silence for several minutes, then looked up at me with something like admiration. You're going to claim the company, aren't you? It's rightfully yours. I'm going to make sure justice is served, I replied. What happens after that? We'll figure out together. 3 days later, Roberto Martinez was arrested at his home on charges of murder in the first degree and fraud. The story exploded across the local and business media, a prominent hotel executive charged with killing his own brother to steal a family fortune. Patricia collapsed when the officers read Roberto his rights, and I held her as she sobbed, her world crumbling around her. In that moment, I realized that seeking justice doesn't make the pain disappear. It just ensures that the pain serves a purpose. Michael and I worked together to navigate the legal complexities of transferring the company ownership. As the rightful heir, I inherited controlling interest in Martinez Hospitality Group, while Michael retained his smaller stake. But instead of pushing him out, I asked him to stay as my partner in rebuilding what our grandfather had envisioned. You have better business instincts than your father ever did, I told him during one of our planning meetings. And unlike him, you actually care about the people who work for us. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated lobby of our flagship hotel, watching employees who had feared for their jobs under Roberto's leadership now working with renewed purpose and pride. We had renamed the company Martinez Rodriguez Hospitality Group, honoring both my father's and mother's names, and implemented profit-sharing programs and advancement opportunities that had never existed before. Patricia visits me sometimes, still struggling with the betrayal of learning who her husband really was. But she's also begun to understand why I had to pursue the truth, and we're slowly building a relationship based on honesty, rather than hidden secrets. Roberto is serving a life sentence for Carlos's murder. I attend his parole hearings not out of hatred, but to ensure that my father's voice is still heard in that room. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure that truth has consequences. What would you have done if you discovered your entire family was built on murder and lies? Sometimes the right choice isn't the easy choice, but it's the only choice that lets you live with yourself. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with others who understand that family loyalty has limits, and that sometimes loving someone means holding them accountable for their actions. The truth about my inheritance changed everything, but more importantly, it taught me that real family isn't about blood or shared secrets. It's about people who choose to see you, support you, and stand with you when doing the right thing costs everything. My name is Sarah Martinez Rodriguez, and I am the rightful heir to my father's legacy and my own truth.